In the dream, they took me to the light. A beautiful lie.
All seconds are busy now. We have ceased our call again.
Hey Exiles, Chronic Painless here to break down how patch 3.21 is going to affect my cold conversion Blade Vortex League Starter / League Finisher build guide. Let's start by just ripping off the band-aid. There's no doubt that Acts 1 through 5 are going to be a lot tougher than before. I've always been upfront about the fact that the pre-BV part of this build guide was cribbed basically directly from the speedrunning community led by Tai Killer, Keldorn, Havoc, and Timmy Tim Tims especially. And since GGG has launched a tactical missile strike against their strats with this latest patch, I'll be waiting along with the rest of Rayclast for them to solve the early campaign for us. Fortunately, the swap to BV should be more or less the same. We'll just have to keep a better eye out for decent wands from drops and vendors along the way. And make sure to jam on that Silver Flask from Act 10 as soon as possible to get Onslaught back in the mix. Moving on to the actual build, it's likely that the most impactful changes are going to be those made to the passive tree. I'm most excited about the new mastery that causes enemies to take increased damage based on how long they've been frozen. I think this is going to feel incredible on bosses. As I've mentioned in previous videos, even though bosses don't literally freeze in the sense that they stop moving, they can still get the frozen debuff if they get hit hard enough. We hit very hard, and will also benefit substantially from the more plentiful sources of increased freeze duration, which essentially causes us to freeze as if dealing more damage. The downside to this is that to make room for all of that extra duration, the increases to ailment effect have largely been removed from cold and elemental clusters. This will make brittle ground much less potent overall, but shouldn't make much of a difference for bone chill purposes since we'll likely continue to chill at maximum effect anyway. But as for the potential of utilizing shocks on the Elementalist, this change will undoubtedly affect the decision between Mastermind of Discord and Shaper of Storms for early Ascendancy choices, pushing things much more in favor of the former. The rest of the tree changes are similarly a mixed bag. The new elemental masteries don't seem that exciting at all, and will definitely miss that early ailment effect, but getting mana reservation back as an option could be a very nice boon. Extra sources of increased maximum resistances are always going to be a welcome change, but moving extra spell suppression to the evasion clusters isn't doing this build any favors. And while Instant Leech has the potential to be incredibly potent for some builds, the ceiling for it is still somewhat low where BV is concerned, since we can't increase our hit rate above 7.5 hits per second. And the maximum total leech per instance is still capped at 10% of your maximum life. As I understand it, this means that 10% instant leech essentially grants 1% max life recovery on hit, assuming you're hitting and leeching hard enough. So, builds that spec to hit more frequently will be able to min-max this effect to a much higher degree. Even still, this new mastery is likely to be a very attractive option. As for the new and updated uniques, the main thing that caught my attention was the new Light Poacher. Believe it or not, this helm was considered best in slot for BV back when I was first playing the ability during Delve League, and it might be a contender once again. Of course, it'll be pretty much strictly a mapping tool, as for bosses without ads, we'll get no bonus from it at all. Some of the other revamped uniques might have some utility in the relatively early league, but we'll have to see just how rare and expensive they are before we get too excited about them. The most direct nerfs inflicted on the build by patch 3.21 are the changes to Arcane Surge and Molten Shell. In the past, putting Arcane Surge on Vortex was a no-brainer, essentially granting 15% more damage for free. But the new cast speed buff pales in comparison, since it won't increase our damage at all and will only make us feel slightly faster, as we'll stop moving for a tiny bit less time on each cast of Blade Vortex. If we've got a slot to spare, it certainly wouldn't hurt, but it looks like Vortex and Bone Chill will be a 2 or 3 link at most during the Crucible League. The nerf to Molten Shell, on the other hand, was honestly completely reasonable. Molten Shell was massively overtuned compared to other guard skills, and I think it'll still be really powerful even with its 50% reduced effectiveness, but I'll have to see how it feels compared to other guard skills with the new numbers. The most direct buff to the build is the change to power charges, which will be huge for the occultist in terms of counteracting the indirect nerfs to brittle ground. And it can even benefit the elementalist with the occasional casting of Assassin's Mark. Finally, the fact that Heat Shiver wasn't nerfed can almost be counted as a buff, because just about everyone expected it to be tuned down at least a little bit, and all the increased freeze duration on the tree is only going to make it that much easier to utilize it reliably. Overall, nothing about the build after Act 5 has been broken by patch 3.21, and the mix of nerfs and buffs seems likely to be more of a wash in the end. That being said, I am super excited to see what options the new Crucible trees will open up, and I'm also hyped that the League mechanic seems extremely well suited for cold BV, since the monsters will be spawning right on top of us if we want them to. I can just imagine how awesome it'll feel to proliferate huge duration freezes through the Crucible packs as they all eventually explode in a shower of Herald MTX. That's all for this video. I'll be back with a full update to the build guide as soon as POB is updated to reflect the new tree changes and I have a little time to play around with it. And as always, try to stay painless.